Okay, I'm through. Nothing, for God's sake!
Working on it.
Don't worry. Okay, we've administered the chloroform. We rendered him unconscious. That usually works for typically about 1 hour. We monitor simply by the pulse. We don't have any sophisticated monitoring. If the pulse would start increasing rapidly, we would administer more chloroform. And chloroform is a clear liquid, and it's the gas itself which renders the patient unconscious. Strong bone, real strong bone.
Waking up.
Okay, I'm through. Move it. Just keep this tight. How's the pulse?
Still, you're still strong, steady.
Very good. Very good.
You got good respiration.
Very good. So I'm going to just put a few sutures in here, and we're going to have to get back to them. So they estimate during the war there was approximately 60,000 amputations, and that was for both sides. The South didn't keep as good of records as the North, and at the end of the war, I personally believe that they got rid of their records. They burned them so that the North didn't get them, and they were primarily arm amputations, and legs were about even, about 15,000 each. Because if you figure how the soldiers, you saw them out here, they're lined up in a line and they're facing like this, most of them right-handed, the enemy. And this is where they're hit. They're hitting their legs and their arm. But they also amputated hands, fingers, and feet too as well. This weaponry and these projectiles at that time did really a good job of busting these bones apart, and there was no other choice but to amputate.
It would also take some of the clothes in, and that would cause infection.
Yes, their clothing, and
And
that
there
was filthy.
was no way to stop infection back then. So if the man survived without infection, it was pretty much a miracle. And some of them did. However, back then they did not know, this is gross, that pus was bad. It was an infection. They thought it was called accelerated healing. And sometimes they would take some from a man that had an infection and put it on the man that didn't have it. They didn't know about germ theory, which was, they were thinking about that a lot in Europe. But the United States only had two microscopes at the time. So it was just coming into like the thought process of the doctors. And they would say, well, there's nothing, it was like almost like aliens. They said, we can't see anything on our hands. There's no such thing as germs. They would rinse their hands in water. They would rinse the tools in water to get the blood off, but not to sterilize. So the chloroform would last maybe almost an hour. The operation would last maybe 15 minutes. So they would wake up from chloroform. They did use ether prior to chloroform. They had it, but when they would operate at night by candlelight, it would blow up.
Yeah, ether's highly flammable.
The nurse would go into the battlefield with a case, and it would have whiskey in it, also opium pills, also morphine powder, which she would put in the wound. Sometimes the men would lay out there for, a couple days, or more, and some people wouldn't make it. She would give them those 3 things to just get them by for a while until the ambulance wagon can come and pick them up and bring them to the field hospital. The South didn't have anything other than probably whiskey and some chloroform. They used to try to capture the medical wagons. Also, they used to try to capture the nurses if they could. But they always returned the nurse. They didn't harm her, not like today where you would never see her again. But it was like a parole of honor that you had to sign at the Confederate hospital, because the nurses, the Southern nurses it was considered highly taboo to work outside. I know I had said that before, but I don't think some of you didn't hear that. So they didn't join the Army. The Union nurses were actually in the Army with Army pay and Army rations and Army pension, and also some are buried in Arlington National Cemetery in the oldest section, which was when Arlington was started, was after the Civil War, for the Civil War soldiers or during. So if the nurse was captured and taken to the Confederate field hospital, she would work until the crisis was over because she had to. Also, Confederate and Union were treated at both hospitals, but they didn't have nurses in the Confederate hospital. And they needed that because before that, the walking wounded men used to help. But sometimes there was no more of those. And those men, they didn't really, like when they cared, because sometimes there would be like 400 of these tents. And so you need a lot of people to feed, change bandages, give medicine. And the walking wounded men didn't always do that very well. And when the nurses came in, the sanitation came way up because they made them clean out the tents, clean out the filthy straw, change their bandages every day, feed them if they couldn't feed themselves, because some of them didn't even have arms. They weren't getting fed by some of the men because there just wasn't enough. So that's why the nurses ultimately, they allowed them to join the Army. And that's where it all started for women in the Army.
We also had morphine back then in powder form. And that was sprinkled directly into the wound. That helped with the pain as well.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah,
Any
I've got a question. How, after a battle like this went on, I mean, how many days were there doctors or nurses working on the wounded people?
They would stay for as long as it took. A lot of times, if you were near a railroad or a river where there were boats, they would send hospital ships or hospital trains. And the worst wounded were loaded onto those trains or boats, and the nurses would go with those men to the nearest big city, and then they would also get returned back to their unit. Yeah, they would do that. But in Gettysburg, they stayed for months. The hospital stayed for months because there was no way you could move all these men. And some of the family members would come and travel from wherever they were to stay with their soldier while they were recovering.
Gettysburg, they were there from July to November. That's how long.
Wow.
Also, it was the first time that they would preserve bodies by embalming for their bodies to be shipped back. Now, not all of them, not because obviously not, but some. They could pay for that, and they would do that. And they would use arsenic.
If a soldier from one side fell or was wounded, and a doctor or nurse from the other side they found him or whatever,
They would treat him.
Oh, they would.
They would
them
treat
back.
him.
Okay, so they wouldn't treat them, but they would get them back to their.
No, they would treat them.
If they were, they could take them to their hospital and they treat them.
Okay,
Yes.
and then
But
hold them
they
as a
would
POW.
eventually get sent back.
Yes.
Or then they may be captured by the soldiers around there if they were well. But if they were sick, they would treat them and get them well as best they could.
A good example of that was second day at Gettysburg. There were 1,800 men came into the Spangler farm. and 1,800 wounded. There were 1,100 Union and 700 Confederate. They just segregated them. They put the Confederates on one side and the Union on the other side, and they dealt with all of them. It was, they were wounded, so they helped them.
Building off of his question, would, at the end of the war, Cold Harbor, around Petersburg, when it descended into trench warfare, is that like the intensity of that warfare and the fact that it was day-to-day fighting, just kind of continuous trench lines, is that a big part of the reason why the casualty rate spiked so much? Because
Yes.
no matter how fast they tried to process it, the next day there was just another battle. There was never really a
Yes.
Right, but the
Too many
surgeons
casualties.
worked day and night. They never stopped. So
at some
they would.
point they had trains taken back to like Washington.
They could. They did, but they still had to take care of the immediate. They couldn't just put them on the train and they would bleed out. You know what I mean? So they had to take care of the worst of the worst. If they could travel and not, it would be like just have like a bullet wound in the flesh.
Yeah.
They could probably take that out really quick. But it was chaos. Usually there would be like hundreds laying wounded, and you could just do the best you could in the triage to have the worst
give you an
case
idea how
brought
heavy that
first.
is.
Oh wow.
Is that what he was hit with?
Yeah, I can see
Yeah,
it.
a minute ball is made out of lead,
Sure, and it's
so
lead.
when it went into
You don't
your
want lead in
body,
your body.
it would
Yeah, yeah.
take some of the
Finish young
clothes
ladies
in,
behind you.
and the clothes were filthy, and that would be, and then the bone would shatter.
Because you gotta realize too.
All the fragments of clothes, and then the infection. They got gangrene really quickly, especially if they
and the
laid on the
weaponry
field
back
for a
then-
day.
You gotta realize too,
Today,
this lead coming out of those barrels,
yeah,
they heat up,
It's hot.
and they would hit this wool clothing and stuff, and it just sear it right into their
Right
skins.
into their skin and inside their body.
Yes.
And they rifled the bullets because the muskets started to be rifled on the inside, so that meant that they were more accurate and they were spinning. But the velocity or the speed of the bullet wasn't as fast as the bullets today, which could go right through. This was still fast, but when it went in there, the lead kind of smashed down too, and it was
Yeah.
hot, and it was
soft.
poisonous, and the infection rate was so high. That's how they saved a life initially, but then.
Infection kills them.
Now, as part of the nurses and stuff,
Is he coming
No, don't
through?
take it out yet.
More ether.
no.
As far as the nurses,
Okay, I know I work with the sanitary commission in our unit.
yeah,
We take the field with our surgeons, and they refer to us as the ice angels with the buckets of waters and stuff like that. Did you do a lot? You would bandage and stuff on the field
Yes.
until the surgeons
That
could
was
get to them
that's
also?
historically correct.
Yes.
In every major battle of the war, the nurses were present.
Great doctor.
The nurses were present on every major battlefield of the war. It's documented because the Union kept.
Because I know when I was down in Narcoossee, they were shocked that they saw a woman out on the field.
all the scholars.
Well, I was in the background too. You were, yes,
I was over here, you were
yes.
there.